Lift your heart, lift your voice, and lift your expectation. This is Thursday, 8 January, and by the authority of heaven, I announce to you, God is changing your story today. There are days that look ordinary on the calendar, yet they are loaded with divine intention. This is one of such days. A day when heaven interrupts patterns, cycles, and repeated struggles. A day when God steps into the narrative of a man, a woman, a family, and declares, enough is enough. Tonight, this is not just a prayer session. This is a divine encounter. An appointment where mercy speaks louder than history, where grace overrides failure, and where destiny is realigned with purpose. Divine timing is one of the most misunderstood yet most powerful realities in the journey of destiny. Many people assume that if God is involved, things must happen quickly, but speed and timing are not the same. Divine timing means that God acts at the precise moment when his intervention will produce maximum glory and lasting results. It is not delay. And it is not denial. It is the wisdom of a God who sees the end from the beginning and understands the full picture of a man's life beyond the present pain. There are moments when heaven deliberately waits, not because God is indifferent, but because certain alignments must come into place. Character must be shaped, understanding must be built, and spiritual capacity must be expanded. If God releases certain blessings before time, they can become burdens instead of testimonies. This is why divine timing is an expression of mercy. God loves you too much to bless you in a way that destroys you. Many stories in life appear stagnant simply because the appointed time has not yet been activated. However, when divine timing arrives, things move with unusual speed. Years of waiting can be resolved in moments. What effort could not achieve in decades, grace accomplishes in an instant. This is the mystery of divine timing. Silence does not mean absence, and waiting does not mean abandonment. Even when God seems quiet, he is still working behind the scenes, arranging events, positioning helpers, and orchestrating outcomes that will shock even the doubters. Divine timing also reveals the sovereignty of God over human calendars. Men count days and years, but God operates by seasons and purposes. A season is not defined by time alone, but by readiness. When readiness meets opportunity under God's authority, transformation occurs. This is why two people can pray the same prayer, make the same effort, and yet experience different outcomes. One has entered the appointed season. The other is still being prepared for it. There is also a dimension of divine timing that confronts fear and impatience. Impatience often pushes people into premature decisions that create long-term consequences. Many destinies have been delayed not by demons, but by haste. When people refuse to wait for God's timing, they settle for substitutes that look like answers but lack divine backing. These substitutes may bring temporary relief, but they eventually expose deeper emptiness. Divine timing protects you from counterfeits. When God decides that the time has come, resistance becomes irrelevant. Doors open without explanation. Favor appears without lobbying. Battles end without struggle. This is because divine timing carries authority. It is not just an opportunity, it is a command from heaven. Situations align because they must obey. People help because they are compelled. Results manifest because the season demands it. Divine timing also redeems lost time. God is not intimidated by wasted years, failures, or wrong choices. When he steps into a life, he has the power to restore in such a way that the future compensates for the past. This does not mean the pain never existed, but it means the pain will not have the final word. What looks like delay can become the foundation of wisdom, depth, and spiritual authority. Understanding divine timing gives peace to the heart. It removes anxiety and comparison. When you know that your life is governed by God's calendar. You stop measuring yourself against others. You stop competing with people who are in different seasons. You learn to trust the process, knowing that when your time comes, it will be undeniable. This is why today is significant, not because of the date alone, but because heaven has marked it as a moment of transition for someone. Divine timing is not just a doctrine, it is an experience. There comes a day when waiting ends and manifestation begins. A day when prayer shifts from asking to thanksgiving. A day when struggle gives way to testimony. When God says now, no power can say later. When he declares that the season has changed, nothing can reverse it. Divine timing ensures that when your story changes, it stays changed. What God does at the right time does not require maintenance. It is sustained by his power. Today, therefore, is not ordinary. It is a reminder that your life is not late, your destiny is not behind, and your future is not compromised. You are simply standing at the edge of divine timing. And when that moment arrives, your story will change in a way that brings glory to God and silence to every opposing voice. The change of story is one of the clearest demonstrations of God's power in the life of a person. When God decides to intervene, he does not merely adjust circumstances or improve conditions. He rewrites the narrative entirely. A changed story means that the conclusion no longer matches the beginning and the outcome no longer reflects the struggle. It is the evidence that a higher hand has stepped into human affairs. Many people are trapped not just by situations, but by stories. Stories of failure, rejection, limitation, shame, and repeated disappointment. These stories are reinforced by experience, by voices around them, and sometimes by their own thoughts. Over time, the story becomes an identity. People stop expecting change because they have lived with the same pattern for too long. However, when God changes a story, he breaks the power of familiarity. He introduces something so new and undeniable that the past can no longer define the future. A changed story is often preceded by a moment of divine interruption. God interrupts routines, expectations, and even plans in order to reveal his purpose. This interruption may not always feel comfortable, but it is necessary. If the old system could produce a new outcome, God would not need to intervene. The very fact that he steps in means that human effort has reached its limit and divine authority is about to be revealed. God does not change stories halfway. When he rewrites a narrative, he ensures that the transformation is complete. This is why his interventions often affect multiple areas at once. He does not only fix what is visible, he heals what is hidden. He does not only change external conditions, he restores internal strength, confidence, and vision. A changed story is not cosmetic, it is foundational. One powerful aspect of a changed story is that it silences accusations. When God acts, explanati, ons become unnecessary. People who once doubted begin to ask questions. Those who mocked become silent observers. This is because divine change carries proof within itself. It does not rely on persuasion, it speaks for itself. God is intentional about changing stories in a way that brings him glory and establishes his faithfulness as a testimony. A change of story also realigns destiny. Many struggles are not random, they are connected to destiny resistance. When a person carries something valuable, opposition often arises to slow them down or divert them. However, when God changes a story, he does not only remove the obstacle, he accelerates the journey. Lost ground is recovered and momentum is restored. What once felt like wasted time becomes preparation for greater responsibility. It is important to understand that God does not wait for perfection before changing a story. If he did, no one would qualify. He responds to faith humility, and surrender. Often, the very place of weakness becomes the platform for transformation. This reveals that the power belongs to God and not to human strength. A change story is therefore a message of grace. When God changes a story, he also changes perspective. The same person who once feared the future begins to look ahead with confidence. Pain no longer produces bitterness, it produces wisdom. Failure no longer defines identity, it becomes a lesson. This shift in perspective is evidence that the change is real and lasting. God does only alter what happens to you. He alters how you see life. Another dimension of a change story is restoration of dignity. God is deeply concerned about honor. He does not just want his people to survive, he wants them to stand tall. When he changes a story, he restores respect, credibility, and value. What was once a source of shame becomes a source of testimony. This restoration is not just personal, it affects families, communities, and future generations. A changed story becomes a reference point for others. It becomes proof that God is still active, still faithful, and still powerful. Many people will believe not because of sermons, but because of what they see God do in your life. This is why God is intentional about the timing and manner of change. He ensures that the transformation is visible and undeniable. Today represents such a moment for someone. A moment when the old narrative loses its authority and a new chapter begins. A moment when the past releases its grip and the future opens with hope. When God changes your story, he does it in a way that cannot be reversed by circumstances or opinions. What he starts, he sustains. This is the confidence we hold. No story is too broken, too long, or too complicated for God to rewrite. When he steps in, the end will always be better than the beginning. And when your story changes, it will be clear to all that it was the hand of God that made the difference. Spiritual alignment is the invisible framework upon which every lasting transformation is built. Without alignment, effort becomes struggle, prayer becomes noise, and progress becomes temporary. Alignment means that a person's heart, choices, values, and direction are brought into agreement with the will and purpose of God. It is not perfection, but positioning. When alignment is present, divine power flows with ease and resistance loses its authority. Many people desire change, but few understand that change is sustained only when alignment is established. God does not bless disorder, he blesses order. When a life is out of alignment, even good things can produce negative results. This is why some blessings become burdens and some opportunities become traps. Spiritual alignment ensures that what God releases can be managed, sustained, and multiplied. Alignment begins internally. Before God changes situations, he addresses the heart. Motives, intentions, and priorities must be examined. A heart that is divided will struggle to carry divine assignments. When alignment is restored within, clarity replaces confusion. Decisions become easier because the noise of competing desires is silenced. This inner alignment creates peace, not because challenges disappear, but because direction becomes clear. Spiritual alignment also involves obedience. Obedience is not a popular concept, but it is a powerful one. It is the practical expression of alignment. When a person obeys God, even when it is uncomfortable or illogical, they demonstrate trust in his wisdom. Obedience positions a person under divine covering, where favor and protection operate naturally. Disobedience, on the other hand, exposes a person to unnecessary struggle. Another critical aspect of alignment is agreement with God's word. Many lives are out of alignment because they believe narratives that contradict divine truth. Fear, limitation, and past failure often shape expectations more than God's promises. Alignment requires renewing the mind to think in harmony with what God has said. When belief aligns with truth, faith becomes effective and prayer gains authority. Spiritual alignment also affects relationships. God often uses people as channels of destiny. When relationships are out of alignment, progress is hindered. Wrong associations can delay purpose, while right connections can accelerate it. Alignment sometimes requires separation, not out of pride, but out of wisdom. God may distance a person from certain influences to preserve focus and direction. This process can feel lonely, but it is often necessary for growth. Timing is another dimension of alignment. A good thing done at the wrong time can produce negative results. Alignment with God includes sensitivity to seasons. Knowing when to act and when to wait is a sign of spiritual maturity. Those who are aligned with God learn to move at His pace. They are not pressured by comparison or driven by fear of missing out. They trust that God's timing is perfect. When alignment is in place, resistance loses its power. This does not mean challenges disappear, but it means they no longer have the authority to stop progress. Aligned lives experience grace in the midst of pressure. What would crush others becomes manageable. This is because alignment creates spiritual leverage. Heaven backs what is aligned with its will. Spiritual alignment also brings consistency. Many people experience moments of breakthrough but fail to sustain them. Alignment ensures continuity. When a life is aligned, progress is not seasonal, it becomes a pattern. Growth is steady and fruit remains. This is the difference between temporary excitement and lasting transformation. God often uses seasons of correction to restore alignment. Correction is not punishment, it is protection. When God corrects, He is preserving destiny. Ignoring correction leads to deviation, but embracing it restores direction. Those who understand this do not resist God's dealings. They welcome them as signs of love and commitment. Alignment ultimately produces rest, not the absence of activity, but the absence of anxiety. When you know you are where God wants you to be, doing what He wants you to do, you are free from the pressure to prove yourself. Confidence replaces insecurity and assurance replaces fear. This rest is a powerful testimony of trust in God. Today is a reminder that alignment precedes acceleration. Before God changes a story publicly, He aligns a life privately. This alignment may involve surrender, repentance, adjustment, and renewed focus. Though the process may be quiet, its results are loud and undeniable. When spiritual alignment is established, destiny flows naturally. Doors open without force, favor speaks without manipulation, and progress becomes sustainable. This is why alignment is not optional, it is essential. A life aligned with God becomes a vessel through which His power, purpose, and glory are revealed. The voice of authority is the expression of divine power released through spoken truth. In the spiritual realm, words are not merely sounds, they are vehicles of power that carry intention, command, and consequence. When God speaks, creation responds without resistance. His voice establishes order, defines identity, and enforces outcomes. Understanding the voice of authority is understanding how heaven governs earth. Authority does not originate from volume or emotion. It flows from position and alignment. When God speaks, His words carry authority because He is the source of all life. Nothing challenges His right to command. This is why His word does not negotiate with circumstances. Light does not debate with darkness. It simply appears and darkness disappears. In the same way, when God releases a word over a situation, the situation must comply. in the life of a believer. The voice of authority is accessed through alignment with God's will and agreement with His word. Authority is not assumed, it is delegated. God shares His authority. Why? Those who are submitted to Him. Submission is not weakness, it is the gateway to power. Those who resist submission often lack authority because authority flows through order. Many people speak words, but few speak with authority. The difference lies in spiritual positioning. Words spoken from fear carry uncertainty. Words spoken from doubt carry hesitation. But words spoken from faith and alignment carry weight. They establish reality rather than react to it. This is why prayer is not begging, it is legislation. True prayer enforces what God has already declared. The voice of authority also confronts chaos. Chaos thrives where there is no clear command. In the beginning, the earth was formless and empty until God spoke. His voice brought structure, boundaries, and purpose. In the same way, when life feels chaotic, it is often because the voice of authority has not yet been released over the situation. Once God speaks, order is restored. Authority also has the power to silence opposing voices. Fear, accusation, and condemnation speak loudly, especially in moments of weakness. However, when the voice of authority is released, these voices lose their influence. God's word has the final say. This is why it is dangerous to allow circumstances to define truth. Truth is defined by God's voice, not by experience. The voice of authority does not require repetition to be effective. One word from God is enough to change a lifetime. When He speaks with clarity and finality. This is why His promises are dependable. They do not fluctuate with seasons or emotions. What God says remains true, even when circumstances suggest otherwise.
There is also a responsibility attached to authority. Those who carry authority must speak with wisdom.
Authority is not for intimidation, it is for transformation. God's voice brings life, not destruction. Even when He corrects, His intention is restoration. Those who speak with divine authority must reflect His character, firm yet full of mercy. Authority grows through intimacy with God. The more a person knows God, the more accurately they represent Him. Intimacy refines perception and sharpens discernment. It aligns a person's words with God's heart. This is why private devotion precedes public authority. Power in the open is sustained by surrender in secret. The voice of authority also activates faith in others. When truth is spoken with conviction, it awakens hope. It reminds people of what is possible. Many lives are transformed not just by miracles, but by words spoken at the right time. Words that break limitations, redefine identity, and point people back to God's purpose in times of transition. The voice of authority becomes especially important. Transition brings uncertainty, and uncertainty invites fear. But when God speaks, direction becomes clear. His voice does not only change outcomes, it guides steps. It tells you where to go, when to move, and what to release. This guidance is a form of PR, protection. Today, the reminder is clear. When God speaks, situations obey. His voice is not subject to debate. It carries the power to change stories, shift seasons, and establish new realities. When that voice is released over a life, nothing remains the same. This is the confidence we hold. Our hope is not in circumstances, systems, or human strength. Our hope is in the voice of a God whose word cannot fail. When He speaks, doors open, chains break, and destinies align. And once His voice has spoken, the matter is settled. Covenant advantage is the spiritual reality that distinguishes those who walk with God from those who rely solely on natural strength. A covenant is not a casual agreement. It is a binding spiritual relationship established on commitment, loyalty, and divine responsibility. When a person enters covenant with God, they step into a realm where life is no longer governed only by effort, chance, or circumstance, but by divine backing. Covenant creates advantage, not because of human perfection, but because of God's faithfulness. Those in covenant do not live as victims of situations. This does not mean they do not face challenges, but it means challenges do not have the final authority over them. Covenant places a person under divine covering. This covering preserves, protects, and positions them for victory even in adverse conditions. What would destroy others becomes a testimony for those who understand covenant. One of the greatest benefits of covenant advantage is access. Covenant grants access to God's resources, wisdom, and intervention. When a person is in covenant, they are not approaching God as a stranger, but as a participant in a divine relationship. This access changes the nature of prayer. Prayer becomes communication, not desperation. It becomes confidence rooted in relationship, not fear rooted in uncertainty. Covenant advantage also redefines identity. Many people struggle because they see themselves only through the lens of their background, failures, or limitations. Covenant introduces a higher identity. It says, you are not just an individual trying to survive. You are a representative of a divine kingdom. This identity carries authority, responsibility, and expectation. When identity changes, behavior and outcomes follow. Another powerful dimension of covenant advantage is divine intervention. God takes personal responsibility for those in covenant. He steps into their battles, fights on their behalf, and defends their cause. This does not mean life becomes effortless, but it means you are never alone. When God intervenes, he does so in ways that leave no doubt that it was his hand at work. Human explanations become insufficient. Covenant advantage also brings consistency. Many people experience occasional breakthroughs, but struggle to sustain progress. Covenant creates a framework for continuity. It ensures that blessings are not seasonal accidents, but ongoing realities. This consistency is not based on luck, but on divine commitment. God honors covenant across generations, which means the impact goes beyond one lifetime. There is also a dimension of discipline within covenant. Covenant is not only about benefits, it is also about responsibility. Those in covenant are corrected, guided, and sometimes restrained for their own good. This discipline is not punishment, it is protection. It keeps a person aligned with purpose and prevents self-destruction. Those outside covenant may appear free, but they are often exposed. Covenant may limit certain choices, but it secures destiny. Covenant advantage breaks the power of randomness. Life outside covenant often feels unpredictable, driven by chance and uncertainty. Covenant introduces order. It ensures that even negative experiences are filtered through divine purpose. What the enemy intends for harm is redirected for growth and advancement. This does not minimize pain, but it ensures pain is not wasted. Another important aspect of covenant advantage is favor. Favor is not popularity, it is divine preference. It causes a person to be helped beyond qualification. Favor opens doors that skill alone cannot open. It brings remembrance in places where names are usually forgotten. This favor is not earned, it is a covenant benefit. However, it is sustained by humility and gratitude. Covenant advantage also produces resilience. Those in covenant develop the ability to rise after setbacks. They may fall, but they do not remain down. As resilience comes from the assurance that God is committed to their restoration. Failure becomes a lesson, not a conclusion. This mindset keeps destiny moving forward despite challenges. Understanding covenant advantage changes how a person faces the future. Fear loses its grip because the future is no longer unknown. It is entrusted to a faithful God. Confidence replaces anxiety. Hope becomes steady rather than fragile. This does not mean there are no questions, but it means there is trust in the one who holds the answers. Today is a reminder that covenant is not a religious concept. It is a living reality. Those who walk in covenant walk with advantage. They are not exempt from storms, but they are preserved within them. They are not immune to pressure, but they are strengthened by it. Covenant ensures that no matter what happens, the end will reflect God's faithfulness. This is why those in covenant never remain victims. Their stories may begin with struggle, but they end with testimony. And when God's covenant is at work, victory is not a possibility, it is an expectation. Light is one of the most powerful metaphors for divine intervention because it represents truth, clarity, life, and authority. Darkness, on the other hand, symbolizes confusion, ignorance, oppression, fear, and limitation. The relationship between light and darkness is not a struggle between equals. Darkness has no substance of its own. It is simply the absence of light. This is why wherever light appears, darkness does not resist, argue, or negotiate. It simply disappears. This principle defines how God brings transformation into the lives of people. Darkness thrives in secrecy and silence. It gains strength where truth is hidden and understanding is absent. Many struggles persist not because they are powerful, but because they remain unexposed. When God releases light into a situation, he reveals what was concealed and exposes what was operating without accountability. This exposure is not meant to shame, it is meant to heal. Healing cannot take place where truth is hidden. The arrival of light brings clarity. Confusion is one of the most paralyzing forms of darkness. When a person does not know what to do, where to go, or who to trust, progress becomes impossible. Light provides direction. It illuminates the path forward and reveals the next step. God often does not show the entire journey at once. He reveals enough to move forward in faith. This measured illumination builds trust and dependence on him. Light also brings freedom. Many forms of bondage are sustained by lies about identity, worth, and possibility. When truth shines, these lies lose their power. A person who sees clearly cannot be easily manipulated or controlled. This is why spiritual enlightenment is a form of deliverance. Understanding breaks chains that force alone cannot. Another dimension of light is life. Darkness drains strength, hope, and motivation. Prolonged exposure to darkness leads to weariness and despair. Light restores vitality. It awakens faith, renews strength, and revives vision. When God shines his light, people who are once tired find the energy to rise again. This renewal is not emotional hype. It is spiritual restoration. Light also brings order. In the beginning, chaos reigned until God spoke and light appeared. Light defined boundaries and established structure. In the same way, when God introduces light into a life, disorder begins to resolve. Priorities are rearranged. Distractions lose influence and focus is restored. This order is essential for sustainable growth. Darkness often attempts to intimidate through fear. Fear thrives where the unknown dominates. Light dispels fear by revealing truth. When you can see clearly, fear loses its grip. This does not mean challenges disappear, but it means they no longer control decisions. Courage is not the absence of danger, it is the presence of light in the midst of uncertainty. Light also attracts. It draws attention and creates visibility. When God's light rests upon a person, their value becomes evident. Opportunities begin to find them. This is not about self-promotion, it is about divine illumination. God makes visible what he wants to use. This visibility is often accompanied by responsibility, as light exposes both strengths and areas that need growth. Another powerful effect of light is separation. Light distinguishes truth from error, right from wrong, and purpose from distractio. Its separation is necessary for maturity. Without it, compromise becomes easy. Light sharpens discernment, enabling a person to make choices that align with destiny. This discernment protects against deception and regret. Darkness cannot return where light is sustained. This is why consistency matters. A moment of illumination can bring relief, but sustained light brings transformation. This requires ongoing alignment with God, continual renewal of the mind, and commitment to truth. Light must be maintained, not assumed. Today is a declaration that light has arrived. It means confusion must give way to clarity. It means fear must give way to faith. It means oppression must give way to freedom. Darkness loses its right to remain, not because of effort, but because of divine presence. When God releases light, he does not partially illuminate. He shines enough to change direction, restore hope, and redefine outcomes. This light is not fragile, it is authoritative. It establishes a new reality that darkness cannot reverse. This is the assurance we hold. Darkness has no future where light is present. The moment God shines his light over a life, the story begins to change. And once light has spoken, darkness is forever displaced. Restoration is one of the clearest expressions of God's nature because it reveals his commitment not just to bless, but to redeem. Restoration goes beyond replacement. It is not merely receiving something new after a loss, it is the recovery of value, dignity, purpose, and honor that were damaged or stolen. When God restores, he does so in a way that addresses both the visible loss and the invisible wounds left behind. Many people live with losses that are not immediately obvious. Time, opportunities, relationships, confidence, and peace can all be lost quietly. Over time, these losses shape expectations and limit hope. People begin to adjust their dreams downward, convincing themselves that certain things are no longer possible. Restoration confronts this silent resignation. It declares that no loss is final when God is involved. God's restoration is intentional and personal. He does not restore mechanically or generically. He restores with understanding of the unique journey of each person. This is why his restoration often includes healing of the heart. Without inner healing, external restoration can feel empty. God ensures that the soul is strengthened to carry what is restored. He rebuilds trust, renews courage, and restores the capacity to hope again. Restoration also carries the element of honor. God is deeply concerned about dignity. He does not want his people to live defined by shame or regret. When he restores, he does so publicly enough to remove reproach. What was once a source of embarrassment becomes a testimony. This restoration of honor is essential because it repositions a person in the eyes of others and in their own self-perception. Another powerful aspect of restoration is multiplication. God does not restore at the level of loss alone. He often restores with increase. This is not excess for indulgence, but abundance for impact. Multiplication ensures that the restored person is not merely surviving, but empowered to help others. It transforms victims into vessels of blessing. Restoration also addresses delay. Many losses are connected to time. Years spent in struggle, seasons that seemed wasted. God's restoration redeems time by accelerating progress. He compresses results, allowing the future to compensate for the past. This does not erase memory, but it redefines its meaning. The pain becomes part of the process that produced wisdom and depth. It is important to understand that restoration often follows alignment and surrender. God restores those who trust him with what remains. Even when little is left, surrender invites divine intervention. God is not limited by quantity, he is moved by faith. When a person places the fragments of their life in his hands, he has the power to rebuild something greater than what was lost. Restoration also breaks the fear of loss. Many people hold back in life because they are afraid of losing again. They avoid commitment, risk, and vulnerability. God's restoration heals this fear by revealing his faithfulness. When a person understands that God can restore, they become free to live fully again. Trust is rebuilt, not just in people, but in God's governance of life. Another dimension of restoration is purpose. Loss often disrules PTS purpose, creating confusion and disorientation. God's restoration realigns destiny. It reminds a person why they were created and what they are called to do. Purpose gives meaning to restoration. Without purpose, restored resources can be wasted. God ensures that what he restores serves a higher goal. Restoration is also progressive. While some restorations happen suddenly, others unfold over time. Each stage builds upon the last. This progression teaches patience and gratitude. It allows character to grow alongside blessing. God is more interested in who a person becomes than in what they receive. Today represents hope for the broken and weary. It is a reminder that God specializes in restoring what seems irreparable. He restores not only what was taken, but what was damaged by the loss. He restores laughter, confidence, and peace. He restores vision and strength. When God restores, the result is wholeness. Life no longer feels fragmented. There is a sense of completeness that goes beyond material gain. This wholeness is evidence that restoration has reached its deepest level. This is the assurance we carry. God is not intimidated by loss. He is not discouraged by damage. His power to restore is greater than any force that caused the loss. And when he restores, he does so with honor, purpose, and lasting impact. Divine speed is the supernatural acceleration that occurs when God decides to intervene in human affairs beyond natural timelines. It is not haste, confusion, or pressure. It is precision powered by authority. Divine speed happens when God compresses processes, bypasses limitations, and brings fulfillment in a way that defies logic. What would normally take years begins to happen in moments, not because effort increased, but because heaven stepped in. Delay is one of the most discouraging experiences in life. It wears down faith, drains strength, and tempts people to question God's faithfulness. Over time, delay can become a mindset. People begin to expect slowness, disappointment, and postponed answers. Divine speed confronts this mindset directly. It announces that God is not bound by the time frames that limit men. He operates above systems, structures, and human predictions. Divine speed does not ignore process. It overrides unnecessary delay. There are seasons where growth and preparation are required, but there are also moments when delay has fulfilled its purpose and must give way to movement. When God releases speed, he does so with intention. It is not random acceleration, it is destiny alignment. Things begin to move because it is time, not because conditions are perfect. One of the mysteries of divine speed is that it often comes after long seasons of waiting. This waiting is not wasted time. It builds capacity, maturity, and endurance. When speed finally arrives, the person is ready to manage what is coming. God ensures that acceleration does not destroy stability. Speed without wisdom can ruin destiny, but divine speed is balanced with grace. Divine speed also exposes the difference between human effort and divine enablement. Many people struggle for years trying to force results. When God steps in, results begin to chase the person. Doors open without lobbying. Opportunities arise without manipulation. Helpers appear without being pursued. This shift reveals that it was never about strength alone. It was about timing and divine involvement. Another dimension of divine speed is recovery. God uses speed to restore lost ground. Opportunities that seem missed are revisited. Progress that was stalled begins to advance rapidly. This does not mean the past is erased, but it means the future is empowered to compensate. Divine speed ensures that destiny is not permanently delayed by past obstacles. Divine speed also silences mockery. Those who waited long often endure ridicule. People assume delay means failure or disqualification. When God releases speed, outcomes change so quickly that explanations become unnecessary. Testimony replaces defense. God is intentional about this because he desires to reveal his faithfulness publicly. Acceleration becomes a sign that he was present all along. Speed from God also brings clarity. When movement begins, confusion often disappears. Direction becomes clear because momentum reveals the path. Fear loses its grip because progress builds confidence. This clarity is important because speed without direction can lead to chaos. Divine speed always moves in alignment with purpose. Another important aspect of divine speed is obedience. Acceleration often requires swift obedience. When God gives instructions in a season of speed, hesitation can create loss. This is why sensitivity to God's voice is critical. Those who discern quickly and respond promptly position themselves to benefit fully from acceleration. Divine speed does not eliminate challenges, but it reduces their impact. Problems that would normally cause long delays are resolved quickly. Resistance that once felt overwhelming loses its power. This does not mean opposition disappears, but it means opposition no longer controls the pace. God sets the rhythm, not circumstances. Speed also reveals favor. Favor shortens distances and reduces effort. It causes people to see value quickly and respond positively. Favor is often the vehicle through which divine speed operates. When favor rests upon a person, access is granted faster, decisions are made quicker, and progress is smoother. Divine speed requires trust. Rapid change can feel overwhelming, especially after long waiting. God strengthens the heart to receive acceleration without fear. He ensures that identity is rooted in him, not in the pace of progress. This stability allows a person to move forward confidently without losing balance. Today is a reminder that delay is not permanent. Seasons change, and when God declares that it is time, movement begins. Divine speed is proof that God is actively involved in the details of life. He knows when to slow a person down and when to release acceleration. When divine speed is released, destiny begins to unfold with momentum. What was stagnant begins to move. What was delayed begins to advance. What seemed impossible begins to happen naturally. This acceleration is not stressful, it is purposeful. This is the assurance we hold. When God steps into a situation, time obeys him. Delay gives way to movement, and waiting gives way to fulfillment. Divine speed ensures that when your story changes, it changes decisively and unmistakably. Identity revelation is the awakening of a person to who they truly are in the light of God's purpose. Many struggles in life are not rooted in lack of effort or opportunity, but in lack of understanding of identity. When identity is unclear, people live beneath their potential, tolerate what they should confront, and pursue what does not align with their calling. A person cannot rise beyond the level of their self-perception. This is why identity revelation is essential before lasting change can occur. Without identity revelation, life becomes reactive. People respond to circumstances rather than lead them. They allow experiences, opinions, and failures to define them. Over time, these external influences form a distorted sense of self. This distortion produces fear, insecurity, and compromise. Identity revelation corrects this distortion by revealing truth. It reintroduces a person to who they are meant to B, not who circumstances have shaped them into. Identity revelation begins with understanding origin. When a person understands where they come from, they gain clarity about where they are going. Origin determines value. When identity is rooted in God, worth is no longer determined by performance or approval. This security creates freedom. A person who knows who they are does not need to compete, pretend, or compare. They operate from confidence, not desperation. One of the most powerful effects of identity revelation is authority. Authority flows naturally from identity. When a person knows who they are, they speak and act with conviction. Doubt loses its influence because decisions are no longer driven by fear of rejection. This authority is not arrogance, it is assurance. It is the quiet confidence that comes from alignment with truth. Identity revelation also reshapes boundaries. People without identity often struggle to say no. They overextend themselves, tolerate disrespect, and compromise values to gain acceptance. When identity is revealed, boundaries become clear. Choices are guided by purpose rather than pressure. This clarity protects destiny from unnecessary distractions and detours. Another critical dimension of identity revelation is responsibility. Knowing who you are also reveals what is expected of you. Identity is not just about privilege, it is about purpose. A person who understands their identity understands their assignment. This understanding brings focus and discipline. Energy is no longer wasted on pursuits that do not align with calling. Identity revelation also heals the wounds of comparison. Comparison thrives where identity is weak. People measure themselves against others, assuming that someone else's success diminishes their own. Identity revelation ends this cycle. It reveals that purpose is unique and cannot be replicated. When a person understands this, they celebrate others without envy and pursue their own path without distraction. Another aspect of identity revelation is resilience. People who know who they are not easily shaken by failure or criticism. They may be corrected, but they are not crushed. They learn, adjust, and continue forward. This resilience is not emotional toughness, it is spiritual stability. Identity becomes an anchor in times of uncertainty. Identity revelation also influences destiny decisions. Choices about relationships, career, and direction become clearer. Many mistakes are made not because of bad intentions, but because of unclear identity. When identity is revealed, discernment improves. A person recognizes what aligns with their purpose and what does not. This discernment saves time, energy, and pain. Another powerful effect of identity revelation is vision. Vision flows from identity. When a person knows who they are, they begin to see what is possible. Dreams expand, faith increases, and limitations lose credibility. Vision is no longer borrowed from others, it is deep. It's covered within. This internal vision fuels perseverance and passion. Identity revelation also restores dignity. Many people live under labels imposed by past mistakes or societal expectations. Identity revelation removes these labels and replaces them with truth. Shame is replaced with honor. Guilt is replaced with grace. This restoration of dignity allows a person to stand confidently in their calling. Today is a reminder that transformation begins with understanding. Before God changes circumstances, He reveals identity. He ensures that the person who receives the blessing is ready to steward it. Identity revelation prepares a person to carry change without losing themselves. When identity is revealed, growth becomes sustainable. Progress is no longer accidental, it is intentional. Life begins to align with purpose, and actions reflect calling. This alignment brings fulfillment beyond external success. This is the assurance we hold. When identity is revealed, destiny is unlocked. A person who knows who they are cannot be easily stopped. They may face opposition, but they will not lose direction. Identity revelation is the foundation upon which lasting transformation is built. Prayer as legislation is one of the most profound yet often misunderstood aspects of spiritual authority. Many people approach prayer as a request, a plea, or an expression of desire. While these elements are not wrong, they are incomplete. True prayer in the context of legislation is the exercise of spiritual authority to enforce the will of God on earth. It is not asking God to act. It is aligning oneself with his authority so that his decisions manifest in the natural realm. This understanding transforms prayer from an act of supplication into an instrument of enforcement. Legislation implies authority, and authority implies alignment. You cannot legislate a kingdom law unless you are a representative of that kingdom. Similarly, prayer as legislation requires alignment with God's will and his word. When your desires, intentions, and understanding correspond with the principles of heaven, your prayers become more than words. They become declarations with weight and effect. They do not merely appeal to God, they release his decree into the circumstances of life. One of the key differences between ordinary prayer and legislative prayer is expectation. In ordinary prayer, the outcome is uncertain. It may or may not happen according to human judgment. In legislative prayer, the outcome is certain, not because of human manipulation, but because it is founded on the authority of heaven. This certainty comes from knowing that what is being declared aligns with God's purposes, promises, and principles. Prayer as legislation enforces a predetermined outcome dictated by divine wisdom, not human preference. Legislative prayer also carries a strategic element. Just as lawmakers pass bills with specific intention, the believer in prayer targets specific areas with precision. And every word matters. Every declaration matters. This is why the word of God emphasizes speaking the word over situations. Death and life are in the power of the tongue. Proverbs 18:21. Legislative prayer recognizes that spiritual authority is exercised through the spoken word in alignment with divine mandate. Every pronouncement is a law executed in the spiritual realm, awaiting manifestation in the natural. Another dimension of prayer as legislation is its ability to enforce change where human effort fails. There are battles that cannot be fought by might, talent, or resources. There are obstacles so entrenched that only heaven's intervention can overcome them. Legislative prayer is the mechanism through which heaven intervenes. It is the enforcement of God's will into situations where natural means are insufficient. When done correctly, it brings results that defy logic, timing, and human understanding. Legislative prayer also establishes boundaries. Just as laws protect a society from chaos, prayer as legislation establishes spiritual order over a life, family, or circumstance. It delineates what is permissible and what is not. Negative influences, opposition, and hidden forces are restrained by the authority invoked in prayer. The power of legislation in prayer is not coercion. It is alignment with ultimate authority that enforces spiritual law. This type of prayer requires both faith and responsibility. Faith is necessary because you are acting in unseen realms. Responsibility is necessary because you are representing the authority of heaven. Misalignment or selfish motives can undermine the effectiveness of legislative prayer. Therefore, it is crucial to understand the principles, timing, and scope of authority before engaging in this form of prayer. The power is in the alignment, not in emotion or intensity. Legislative prayer also produces results that are reproducible. Unlike emotional prayer that may produce temporary relief, prayer rooted in spiritual law creates sustainable outcomes. Once God's decree is enforced, it manifests in ways that cannot be easily reversed. This is why persistent, obedient, and aligned legislative prayer is foundational to transformation, breakthrough, and long-term success. It is the instrument through which heaven and earth are synchronized. Furthermore, legislative prayer strengthens the believer. Each time a prayer aligned with God's authority produces results, confidence grows. The believer begins to understand the weight of their words, the reality of spiritual authority, and the mechanics of divine law. This confidence is not pride. It is the recognition of one's rightful position as a child of God, authorized to release his will on earth. Legislative prayer also magnifies the impact of intercession. When one person prays with authority, it can influence situations beyond immediate knowledge. The spiritual realms are interconnected. By enforcing God's will through prayer, the believer participates in systemic change. This is why intercession has always been described as standing in the gap. Prayer as legislation fills voids and restores balance where injustice, delay, or opposition exist. Today, legislative prayer is a call to responsibility. It is a call to move beyond casual or emotional prayer and step into the authority delegated by God. When exercised properly, it shifts realities, opens doors, restores, protects, and establishes purpose. It ensures that God's will, which is perfect, powerful, and eternal, is executed in the lives of those who believe. This is the certainty we hold. Prayer as legislation is not optional. It is strategic. It is not a suggestion. It is enforcement. It is not about convincing God to act, but about aligning with him so that his law, authority, and power manifest in the earth. When this principle is understood and applied, prayer becomes unstoppable, outcomes become predictable, and lives are transformed permanently. Today is a pivotal moment in your life. Every principle we have explored, from understanding divine timing to embracing covenant advantage, from walking in spiritual alignment to recognizing your identity, from releasing the voice of authority to legislating prayer, points to one undeniable truth. God is ready to change your story. The obstacles that once seemed insurmountable, the delays that frustrated your heart, and the losses that left you discouraged are no longer permanent. Heaven has stepped in and your narrative is being rewritten. Change does not happen by chance. It happens by divine intervention. Every key principle we have discussed is a gateway to transformation. When you align your heart with God, speak with authority, step into your covenant, and trust in his timing, you are no longer subject to the patterns of the past. You become a participant in the extraordinary, a vessel for supernatural breakthrough, and a testimony of God's faithfulness. Restoration, favor, light, and divine speed are all part of the process, but none of it works fully apart from your awareness of who you are and your willingness to partner with God. Your prayers are not mere requests. They are legislative decrees that enforce heaven's agenda on earth. Your obedience, faith, and expectation activate what God has already ordained. Today, on this Thursday, 8 January, the season of waiting is over. The story that seemed delayed is now unfolding. The darkness that tried to define your life is giving way to light. Your losses are being restored with increase. Your destiny is being released. Your identity is being affirmed. The chains that bound you are breaking. Every situation that opposed your progress is now under divine authority. Step into this change with confidence, boldness, and gratitude. Walk as someone who knows that God is in control, that your story is being rewritten, and that every promise spoken over your life is ready to manifest. This is not just a hopeful thought. It is a spiritual reality. Heaven is active and your life is the evidence of its intervention. Embrace this moment. Expect miracles. Declare your faith. Speak your story into existence. And remember, When God changes a story, it is irreversible, unstoppable, and glorifying to Him. Today is your day. Today, God is changing your story. Your testimony begins now.